the House, the Senate, all of that area, which is going to today see a slightly modified oath-taking ceremony. It used to take place on the steps of the US Capitol. Now it's been brought inwards because of the extreme cold in America. And you can see the former presidents there in attendance, the Bushes, the Clintons, the Obamas, all there. Mrs. Obama, of course, wasn't seen with Mr. Obama coming in, so maybe she's not quite well, etc. But that's the Trump family, elements of the Trump family there. And of course, you saw all the big tech czars, Sam Altman, Zuckerberg, Musk, Pichai, and Bezos, all together in the gallery looking at this important moment in US history. Never before, viewers, has a president won so many things at one go. He literally has America at his feet. There is majority in both houses of parliament. This is very, very rare. He has a clean majority of the popular vote. He also has, of course, viewers, greater legitimacy because a large chunk of diverse Americans have voted for him. So in the sweepstakes of inclusivity, he can also suggest to people that, look, he has an advantage there too. But those are the pictures that are coming in. The who's who of America packing into this hall, historic building. It hasn't seen an inauguration in the recent past indoors, so this is a break from tradition. It also hasn't seen invites to foreign heads of state. So you've already seen people like Giorgia Meloni, who is Italian Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, several other top leaders, Javier Milei. All of these are heads of state, and of course, India represented by Mr. S. Shivshankar, the foreign minister. But India has had some tricky moments with the Biden administration, which is outgoing, as have many other sovereign nations on socio-political issues. The outgoing US president proved to be susceptible to the views of left elements within his own party, prompting the White House and State Department to raise red flags over the state of democracy and the allegedly poor condition of minorities in India. Biden's critics often say that he conceded too much ground to the left and promoted a new woke ideology, softened the discourse on immigration, multiculturalism, and gender, that he gave a long rope to non-state actors in the US to meddle in India affairs. That's what some people say. These included Soros' Open Society, sundry groups that were handing out gratuitous health certificates on the state of democracy in India, religious freedoms in India, gender relations in India, and other parts of the world. That this wide berth allowed, for instance, in the Indian context, Sikh and Muslim extremism to establish a toehold on US soil, having a direct impact on security on our soil. Now the culture warriors on the right want Trump to start battling the so-called, quote, woke virus, unquote, as they claim has infected the system, especially the deep state. Trump has vowed to drain the swamp. Let's open this up and have some interesting questions about how Trump is going to change the way he's going to look at the world and whether India will feel the impact at any level. So let's open this up. We're joined by Alex Dan. Nice to see you again. We also have strategic expert with us from the Wilson Center, Mr. Kugelman. We have senior fellow of the CRPC with us, IPCS with us, Mr. Iyer-Mitra. And we also have a journalist to give his perspective, Spencer Critchley, very well heralded journalist from the United States. Mr. Critchley, very quickly, culture wars, big question, woke. I don't know what to call it, but this is what the Americans seem to suggest of a particular persuasion. It's a woke virus. First of all, what does all this mean?
Yes, the Americans of a particular persuasion being Donald Trump supporters. I think this is a very important distinction to make and to undo the conflation of so-called wokeness with liberalism, which is the philosophy underpinning liberal democracy. India was founded as a liberal democracy in 1947. The United States was founded as the first liberal democracy. Liberalism is not wokeness. In fact, wokeness is explicitly anti-liberal, as is Trumpism. They They are attacks on liberalism from the left, from the anti-liberal left in the case of wokeness, and the anti-liberal right in the case of Trumpism or MAGA. It's to Trump's advantage to try to confuse wokeness with liberalism. But liberals, and I mean people from the right to the left who believe in the philosophy of liberalism, the philosophy of individual freedom and equality and democratic self-government, they need to do a better job of defending liberalism. Liberalism is under attack around the world, and excuse me, I think liberalism is somewhat endangered in your country as well. It's in grave danger in my country. That, I think, is a very important distinction to make here. And when Joe Biden talks about things like human rights, whether in the United States or in other countries, you might agree or disagree with the individual point he's making, but he's not being woke. He's defending the fundamental values of democracy, which is liberal democracy in the broad-based sense, which, as I say, goes from the left to the right.
Iyer-Mitra, would you like to respond?
Look, there's nothing even remotely liberal about the Biden administration. Let's be very clear about that. We have never seen a more disastrous misuse of the law, consistent lawfare that has been used against the former president and his people around him ever. Biden succeeded in making America look like a third world tin pot dictatorship. You'd expect this in Uganda, maybe in Kenya or things like that, but certainly not in America. You know, we were always taught the very definition of why America was different, why the FBI was different from the KGB, is because the KGB could always go into a hotel, see what you were up to, demand its records to see if you had an affair or something, and then prosecute you. In America, you had to come across it. We saw all those red lines wiped out during Biden. Today, he has gone and pardoned the Jan 6th committee. He's gone and pardoned Anthony Fauci. And mind you, there is actual US Supreme Court judgment, Berdwick versus the United States, which clearly states that a presumptive pardon presumptively assumes guilt. The sheer impunity with which you have seen governments the Biden administration violate every single shred of American law. Immigration, another classic case. They keep confusing, legal immigration with illegal immigration. They said immigrants made this country great. True, legal immigrants made that country great, not illegal immigration. Remember, illegality is fungible. One route of illegality always becomes other routes of illegality. The same tracks used to smuggle in illegal immigrants are used to smuggle in drugs. And let's not pretend America doesn't have a drug problem. This is the classic kind of goalpost shifting we've seen throughout this previous administration, be it censorship, be it terrorizing its opponents, its political opponents. What liberalism remotely have we seen with the Biden administration? It has been an extreme far left woke ideology, trumpeting talking points that we thought died with the USSR. But oh no, that's,
If I may, it's difficult to debate a series of assertions that are completely unsupported by the facts.
I'm sorry, I've not
make all kinds
yet.
of
I have
dramatic
not
assertions.
I have
One
not
can make all
yet.
sorts of dramatic assertions
I have not
of any
yielded
kind.
yet.
But
Now, this man
the
can
facts
go around
Okay, no, no,
with
hang on, just a minute.
everything we just heard.
Just a minute,
So I'd
gentlemen.
like to see some.
timeline.
Let's
I'd like
not-
to
let's
hear
not-
some evidence.
Okay,
that
let's not
supports-
snipe at each other
Excuse me,
across.
I waited to allow you
For
to
him to
finish,
come
sir.
here, he's just being
I
mendacious.
would like
Okay,
to
okay,
hear
one
some
second,
evidence
gentlemen,
that
let's not
actually
get personal.
supports
I'll have to
any
know
of
your
these
feelings.
assertions.
Gentlemen, please,
If you want
let's-
to try to shout over me, we can
No,
have
please,
a shouting
just
contest. but I'm
excuse
not
me.
going to shout.
Let me
Don't
handle this
come
I would
debate.
like to
tell me I'm
hear.
Mr. Critchley, Mr. Iyer, please, let's just calm down. 30 seconds, please take a pause. We didn't want to go here. People have a point of view. They're expressing it. Let me just bring in others for two or 3 minutes to calm this situation
I
down.
hope we can have a discussion based on evidence, and
Yes.
I hope it will
Okay.
be civil.
Okay.
But wild assertions that are contradicted by
okay.
the evidence are not going to do
Your
anybody
Mr.
any
assertions
good.
are
Critchley, it's his
wild.
point of view. It's his point of view. You've got yours. I'll allow you in. Don't worry. Let's just open this up. 30 seconds, please. Let's all take a deep breath. Mr. Kugelman, I'm sorry about this, but I need to come out to you. There is a view here in India that several US politicians on the left-leaning Democrat side, and I'm not talking about the woke side or anything like that. I'm just talking about slightly more left elements within the Democrat side of the fence. For example, gratuitously tweeted in favor of protesting farmers, hobnobbed with leaders of the Indian opposition, especially Rahul Gandhi, created a bit of a ripple here at the time when Modi was visiting America. Red flag so-called Islamophobia in India. Is that all going to be now consigned to the back benches? Is that all history, or is that still going to rear its head in different quarters?
Well, that's politics, and that's democracy. And some of these, or many of these progressive Democrats that you were alluding to are still in office. They're going to be reporting for duty on Capitol Hill, and they'll express the views that they choose to express. But certainly, I think that the mood will be different now that, as was noted before, the leadership on Capitol Hill on both sides is going to be very different. And I think that you're going to have newer voices with different views dominating debates on many levels. But when it comes to some progressive Democrats expressing views about India that might not be received well, I mean, that's just the way it works. And I don't think that we should overstate the impact that will have on, say, U.S. relations with India in the Trump era. But I just wanted to very quickly go back to some points that were made earlier. One in particular, in evaluating Biden, I think it's important to take the focus abroad. I remember when Biden first took office, people were talking about him and his administration being one of the most experienced in foreign policy of any presidency the U.S. had seen for many years. And yet it is very strikingly ironic that he will be remembered, unfortunately, I think, for some major foreign policy failures that, in some cases might have cost the Democratic Party the election. Starting with the Afghanistan withdrawal, it was botched, and this happened very early on in Biden's administration. And then toward the end of his administration, how he handled the war in Gaza. And so I think this is just, again, very striking, given the experience that Biden and so many of his deputies had on foreign policy issues for so many years. And yet, when it comes to his legacy, how he'll be remembered, I think that even many of his supporters will acknowledge that there were some really significant errors or miscalculations made on the foreign policy front.
Well, a couple of them were, of course, the sudden evacuation from Afghanistan. And many people say regime change in Bangladesh. Now, if I were to pick up on Mr. Iyer-Mitra, he'd say that's not liberal at all. When you go in and interfere in another state's democratic setup, whether you agree with it or not, regime change is never really something that is in contiguity with any constitutional values.
Is that to me?
Yes, Mr. Kugelman. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, my view is that there's no evidence whatsoever that the U.S. was involved in the change of government and the mass movement in Bangladesh. And I know that there's a very different view among many there in India. So I wouldn't put that in the same category, though certainly one could argue that U.S. policy in Bangladesh, which consisted of a lot of vocal criticism of the Hasina government, led to an election that was not free and fair, which is what the Biden administration had been saying it wanted to see.
Right.
So I think that that one could argue didn't succeed either. If the U.S. had hoped that by using Bangladesh as a test case for its democracy promotion policy, which, as we know, was used very selectively around the world, then it was not successful. But I don't put Bangladesh on my list. One could talk about Ukraine. To an extent, the Biden administration tried very hard to stop Putin from invading Ukraine. One could argue who could have stopped him, but the U.S. did try very hard. It didn't succeed. That was another disappointment as well. So, unfortunately, a number of disappointments to look at on the foreign policy front.
Okay, Alex Zan, let me bring you in before I go back to Spencer Critchley and Abhijit Mitra. Alex Zan, woke virus, draining the swamp. What do these terms mean? Will they have a foreign policy dimension or an impact on foreign policy at any level? We have suffered, according to one narrative here in India, interference from people like George Soros, etc., people who've sort of wanted to spread all sorts of lies about the current administration in power here in India. Will all that sort of now, at some level or the other, be tempered in the United States with Trump's coming?
It's a turning of the tide, Rahul. This is a changing of the guard in Washington, D.C., not just from one administration to the next, but a change in ideology. You can call it a woke mind virus. I call it an ideology. This globalist ideology that has guided the Biden administration, that guided the Obama administration 2 terms before that, that has guided other politicians in the United States of America, that comes to an end today. This is day one of a new reality. The globalist mentality that there are 0 borders and an infinite number of genders has been disproven by the voters of the United States of America. That was the message in November that voters were sending. And we see from President Trump these planned actions that we're expecting within the next few hours on the first day of his administration, the first hours of his administration, are targeted toward the border. That is no accident. Trump's voters and individuals from India to the UK to Germany to across this world want borders reestablished and are tired of being told that respecting a border makes you racist. It doesn't. It means you can read a map. It means you respect territorial integrity. That kind of restoration is what's occurring today. George Soros has been at the vanguard of this globalist push for 30 years. This scene here in the US Capitol means that the voters of the United States are finally, firmly turning the tide against him and against his cronies who are perpetuating that mind virus across the world.
Mr. Critchley, you wanted to come in.
I'd like to draw another very important distinction, in my opinion. It's entirely legitimate for voters to decide that they want a less, as it's called, globalist kind of approach in the United States and a more populist one that Trump supposedly represents. Trump with his Billionaire Boys Club joining him on stage while his supporters freeze in the cold outside. But that remark aside, it is entirely democratically legitimate for voters to vote for dramatic changes in policy and overall strategy for the United States. I want to draw a distinction between that and what's happening today with the inauguration again of Donald Trump. The concern there, the overriding concern there, is not any particular policy, assuming those policies are implemented legally. It's authoritarianism and criminality. Donald Trump tried to overthrow American democracy and has continued to try to do that ever since. He is on tape attempting to extort famously 11,780 extra votes from the Secretary of State of Georgia to overthrow the election. He conducted a multi-pronged assault on the election of 2020, not just on January 6, 2021, but for months and months ahead of time. This and his criminality, well, it's been adjudicated in court. He's the first convicted felon ever to be elected president of the United States. But even if you don't like that verdict, there are just endless examples of him trying to extort Zelensky way back to try to invent dirt on Joe Biden back when he was running against Biden. The list goes on and on. His entire career has been a career of what we call grifting in the United States. If there's one thing he's successful at, is that he's history's most successful con man. So as I say, one can agree or disagree with his policies, and that's just democracy in action, that if the voters choose those policies, that's a legitimate choice. The problem here is he's an authoritarian who is attacking democracy, and he's a criminal.
Okay. Iyer-Mitra, your response to that. And how is that going to play out internationally, if at all?
I don't respond to lies. It's just a barrage of lies, a farrago of distortions. It's pointless responding to it. I'm not going to grace it with
Okay, so let me ask you this question, because this is important. At the end of the day, there was an impression created here in India, and this is widely reported, that the government feels that perhaps there was a larger panoply of non-state actors that were involved in some way or the other with the Biden regime to try and put pressure on India on certain issues that it found troubling. Do you think all of those levers that were used allegedly by the Biden regime, is that now all gone? Is it all over?
No, it's not gone, and it won't go completely. Remember, the American system is a bit like the Augustan system. Everything depends on the emperor, you see. When you have a president in this case who is not completely all there for anything more than 1 or 2 hours a day, you can't, synthesize all the silos all governments work at cross purposes. In this particular case, you had silos like Jake Sullivan and Gina Raimondo, who were extremely pro-India, doing lots of things to improve the relationship. And you had silos like Blinken and co, who were pointlessly needling, I would say, almost in an undiplomatic way. You have verifiable money trails to certain media outlets of US aid giving them money, of the US embassy giving them money. This was clearly demonstrated by the BJP itself. The Americans never denied it. They put out a very, nobody wanted to face it at the embassy out here. They came and put out an extremely weakly worded statement, just an emailed statement. They didn't want to address it. They didn't want to talk about it. What does that say about it?
So are you saying now that's all history, or will that continue? I'm trying to understand that.
It depends on lots of factors. It depends on how much of this wastage of money, of US taxpayers' money, on pointless NGOs. What is the point of a non-governmental organization if it has to survive on government handouts? That destroys the whole point of an NGO, you see? So it depends on what Doge, what Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy do on the one hand. How much are they going to cut? How much of this wastage of taxpayer money are they going to cut? And on the other hand, how much we tighten up our own laws against this kind of, technically, foreign money coming to NGOs has to go through the FCRA Act. We have not implemented that act properly. There is a implementation lacuna in India.
Okay. Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much for speaking with me this evening. Sorry it got a little